Mary Okafor moved through the candlelit dining room of the Fung estate, her shoulders slightly hunched as she refilled crystal wine glasses with practiced invisibility. At 28 years old, her hands moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that the less space she took up, the safer she remained. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun beneath her white maid's cap, and though her black uniform with its crisp white apron was immaculate, there was a small darn on the left shoulder she'd repaired herself 3 times, invisible to most, but a source of shame she carried like a weight. She had been working at the mansion for 11 months. 11 months of waking at dawn, of swallowing insults, of tiptoeing past Tara Reppert's explosive moods. All to send money back home to her sister's medical bills and keep the bank from foreclosing on her late mother's house. The only thing she had left of the woman who taught her that kindness was never wasted. The dining room glittered with excess that Tuesday evening, Tara's birthday celebration in full display. Guests in designer gowns and custom suits laughed too loudly, their conversations about vacation homes and stock portfolios creating a wall of sound that made Mary feel like she was drowning. She belonged here even less than she belonged anywhere, yet she moved between them like a ghost, pouring wine, clearing plates, surviving. When she reached Tara Reppert's seat at the head of the table, Mary kept her eyes down. She had no idea that the woman in the crimson dress had been watching her all night with barely contained rage, and she certainly didn't know that the man standing in the doorway, Michael Fung, with his dark suit and tattooed neck, had also been watching her, but with an entirely different expression in his eyes. Mary didn't see Tara's hand rise. She only heard the sound of fabric tearing. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you. The sound echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Mary felt the fabric give way before she understood what was happening. The shoulder seam of her uniform splitting open, the white strap of her bra suddenly exposed to 40 pairs of eyes. Cold air hit her skin. Her wine carafe slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor, sending burgundy liquid splashing across Tara Reppert's Louboutin heels. "You clumsy, thieving bitch." Tara's voice cut through the shocked silence. The woman stood now, her crimson dress seeming to pulse with rage in the candlelight, her manicured fingers still clutching the torn piece of Mary's uniform like a trophy. Around them, the guests had gone statue still, forks suspended halfway to mouths, wine glasses frozen mid-sip. Mary's hands flew to her shoulder, trying desperately to hold the torn fabric together, her fingers trembling so badly she could barely grip the material. Heat flooded her face. The kind of burning, total humiliation that made her wish she could dissolve into the floor with the spilled wine. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words automatic, conditioned. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Reppert, I didn't." "Didn't what?" Tara stepped closer, her Chanel No. 5 perfume overwhelming. "Didn't think I'd notice you stealing from me? Didn't think anyone would care about a nobody like you putting her dirty hands on my things?" "I didn't steal anything." Mary's voice cracked. She was still backing away, still clutching her uniform, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "I would never." "Liar." Tara's hand shot out and grabbed the small gold chain around Mary's neck, a delicate thing with a tiny cross, the last gift from Mary's mother. She yanked hard enough that the clasp bit into Mary's skin. "This. Where did you get this?" "I have one exactly like it in my jewelry box." "Or I did, until you decided to help yourself." The guests began to murmur. Mary heard the words. "Shame. Always knew. Can't trust them." "My mother gave me that," Mary said, her voice barely audible now. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "It was hers. It's all I've left of." Tara ripped the necklace off. The chain snapped, and the cross fell to the floor, bouncing twice before landing in a pool of red wine. "Get out of my house," Tara hissed. You're fired. You're lucky I don't call the police and have you arrested right now, you little thief." Mary dropped to her knees, her hands scrambling through the wine and broken glass, desperately searching for the cross. Blood mixed with burgundy as glass cut into her palm, but she didn't care. She couldn't leave it. She couldn't lose the last piece of her mother. A woman in a silver gown laughed, a nervous, tittering sound. A man in a tuxedo cleared his throat and looked away. No one moved to help. "I said get out." Tara kicked at Mary's hands, her heel connecting with Mary's wrist hard enough to send a spike of pain up her arm. "Please," Mary sobbed, still searching. "Please, just let me find." The heavy oak doors at the far end of the dining room slammed open. The sound was so loud, so violent, that every head in the room turned at once. Michael Fung stood in the doorway, his tall frame backlit by the hallway light, his shadow stretching across the floor like a dark omen. He had removed his suit jacket, and in his white dress shirt, the tattoos on his neck were clearly visible, dragons and serpents that seemed to writhe as he moved. His eyes swept the room with the cold efficiency of a predator assessing prey. They landed on Tara, then on Mary, kneeling in wine and glass, clutching her torn uniform, blood on her hands. His expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Several guests instinctively leaned back in their chairs. Michael walked into the room with measured, deliberate steps. His shoes made no sound on the marble, but somehow each footfall felt like thunder. He moved past his wife without looking at her, past the guests frozen in their seats, until he stood directly in front of Mary. She looked up at him through tears, her face a mask of shame and terror. She expected him to tell her to leave,
to call security,
to side with his wife, because that's what powerful men did. Instead, Michael Fung knelt down. He knelt in the wine and the glass, heedless of his expensive clothes, and picked up the tiny gold cross from the puddle. He wiped it clean with his pocket square, then gently placed it in Mary's bleeding palm and closed her fingers around it. "Are you hurt?" His voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent room. Mary couldn't speak. She could only stare at him, at this man who had barely spoken 10 words to her in 11 months, who was now kneeling beside her like she was someone who mattered. Michael's jaw tightened as he took in the torn uniform, the exposed shoulder, the cuts on her hands. Then he stood and removed his white dress shirt in one smooth motion, revealing the tattoos that covered his chest and arms, art and scars intertwined. He draped the shirt over Mary's shoulders, covering her, his movements careful and precise. Only then did he turn to face his wife. The look on Tara's face was one of confusion rapidly morphing into fury. "Michael, this girl stole from. Get away from her." 3 words, spoken quietly, but they landed like blows.
Tara blinked.
"Excuse me?" Michael moved between them, putting his body between Mary and his wife like a wall. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something lethal, something that made the guests collectively hold their breath. "I said, get away from her. She's a thief, Michael. You're a liar." The roar that came out of Michael Fung made the chandelier crystals tremble. Tara actually stumbled backward, her face going white. Around them, people half rose from their seats, unsure whether to flee or stay. Michael advanced on his wife, his hands balled into fists at his sides, every muscle in his body coiled with barely restrained violence. "You want to know what she is, Tara? You want to know why she's in this house? Michael, what are you? 5 years ago, I was bleeding out in an alley downtown. 3 bullets in my chest. Left for dead by the Kozlov crew after a deal went bad." His voice was raw now, stripped of its usual control. "I was 23 years old, and I was dying alone in the dark like a dog. He pointed at Mary without looking at her, his eyes locked on Tara like a targeting system. She found me. This woman you just humiliated in front of your friends. She was working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital, cutting through that alley on her way home. She could have walked past. She could have called the cops. Instead, she dragged me into her car, got blood all over her seats, and took me to her apartment because she knew if I went to a hospital, I'd be arrested or finished off by whoever paid for the hit. The room had gone so quiet that Mary could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She was still on the floor, still clutching Michael's shirt around her shoulders, staring at him with dawning recognition. She stitched me up with a sewing needle and fishing line, because that's all she had. She gave me her antibiotics from a tooth infection. She stayed up for 3 days straight, making sure I didn't die. Michael's voice cracked. She saved my life, and when I finally came to enough to thank her, to ask her name, so I could repay her, you know what she said? He turned slightly, and for the first time, his eyes met Mary's. There was something in them she'd never seen before, something vulnerable and fierce and utterly overwhelming. She said, "You don't owe me anything. That's what humans do for each other." Then she left for her shift at the hospital and told me to be gone when she got back because she didn't want trouble. Michael turned back to Tara, and now his face was a mask of cold fury. I never forgot her face. I spent 2 years looking for her. When I finally found her, she was working 3 jobs, drowning in her dead mother's medical bills. So I hired her, anonymously, through an agency, paid her triple what she was making, made sure she had health insurance, made sure she was safe. He took another step toward Tara, who was now backed against the wall, her face drained of color. "She became the reason I'm still here, Tara. The reason I built this empire. The reason I have anything at all. And you," his voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt louder than his shout, "you put your hands on her. You tore her clothes. You humiliated her in front of these parasites you call friends." Tara's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Michael looked past her to the 2 men in dark suits who had appeared in the doorway, his personal security. "Get her out of my house." "Michael, you can't. Get her out." The roar returned, and now there was no mistaking the violence barely leashed beneath his skin. "Get her out before I forget she's a woman and deal with her the way I deal with any man who touched Mary." The guards moved forward. Tara's eyes went wide with panic and disbelief. "You're throwing me out? For a maid?" "For some." "Say one more word," Michael said, his voice deadly calm again, "and you won't make it to the driveway." The guards took Tara by the arms. She began to struggle, her composure finally cracking completely. "This is my house. These are my friends. You can't do this. Michael. Michael. My lawyers will contact you about the divorce," Michael said flatly, not even looking at her anymore. "You get nothing. Not $1. Not a dish. You leave with exactly what you brought into this marriage, which, if I remember correctly, was debt, lies, and an inflated sense of your own importance." Tara's screams echoed through the mansion as the guards hauled her toward the door. The guests sat frozen, no one willing to meet Michael's eyes. He surveyed them with open contempt. "Get out," he said quietly. "All of you. Now." There was a scramble of movement, chairs scraping, silverware clattering, designer bags being grabbed. The exodus was swift and silent, 40 people fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. In less than 2 minutes, the dining room was empty except for Michael and Mary. Michael stood in the center of the devastation, the overturned chairs, the spilled wine, the shattered crystal, and slowly, carefully, he turned to face Mary. She was still on the floor, still clutching his shirt, still staring at him with wide, uncomprehending eyes. Blood had dried on her palm. Tears tracked through the makeup she'd carefully applied that morning. Can you stand? He asked gently. Mary nodded, but didn't move. Couldn't move. Her body had locked up, shock settling into her bones. Michael knelt beside her again. This time, he held out his hand. Let me help you. Slowly, Mary placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers carefully, mindful of the cuts. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. The shirt he'd given her hung down to her thighs, swallowing her small frame. Come with me, Michael said softly. Please. He led her through the mansion, through hallways she'd cleaned 100 times but never truly seen. They passed staff members who pressed themselves against the walls, their eyes averted. They climbed a staircase she'd only ever used to reach the third-floor servants' quarters. At the top, Michael opened a door to a suite Mary had been explicitly forbidden from entering. The master bedroom was massive, all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's grounds. Michael guided her to a leather chair near the fireplace and gently helped her sit. Then he disappeared into the adjoining bathroom and returned with a first aid kit. He knelt in front of her for the third time that night. Let me see your hands, he said. Mary extended them mutely. Michael cradled her injured palm in his larger hand and began carefully removing shards of glass with tweezers. His touch was impossibly gentle for a man whose reputation was built on violence. Each time she flinched, he paused, waiting for her to nod before continuing. Why didn't you tell me? Mary finally whispered. All these months, you never said anything. Michael didn't look up from his work, dabbing antiseptic on her cuts. What was I supposed to say? Hi, remember me? The dying criminal you saved? Now you work for me. How convenient. He shook his head. You gave me my life back and asked for nothing. The least I could do was let you have your dignity, your independence. Let you think you earned this job on your own merit. But I didn't. You did. Now he looked up, his dark eyes intense. Every glowing review from the agency was real. Every compliment from the staff was earned. You're the best person in this house, Mary. You always have been. He finished bandaging her hand and moved on to cleaning the wine from her legs, his movements still careful, still respectful. Mary felt tears welling up again. I don't understand, she said. You're married. You have this life. Why would you risk it for me? Michael's hand stilled. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, that woman downstairs. I married her because my business needed legitimacy. A wife from a respectable family, someone who could help me look legitimate. It was a transaction, nothing more. She knew it. I knew it. And for 3 years, it worked well enough. He stood and moved to the window, his back to her, his tattooed shoulders tense. But then I found you. And every day, watching you move through this house, seeing your kindness even when people treated you like furniture, it reminded me of who I was supposed to be, who I wanted to be. He turned to face her, and in the dim light, he looked younger somehow, vulnerable. I fell in love with you, Mary. Slowly, quietly. I fell in love with the woman who saved a stranger without asking for anything in return. And tonight, when I saw Tara put her hands on you, his jaw clenched. I would have burned this entire estate to the ground if it meant keeping you safe. Mary couldn't breathe. The world had tilted on its axis, and she couldn't find her footing. I can't, Mr. Fung. Michael, he said softly. Please. Just Michael. Michael. His name felt strange on her tongue.
I'm nobody.
I'm just a maid. You can't throw your life away for... You're not a maid anymore. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her once more, taking her bandaged hands in his. I won't force anything on you. If you want to leave tomorrow, I'll set you up in your own place, debt-free, with enough money to start over anywhere you want. But Mary, I'm asking you, begging you,
To stay.
not as an employee, as my equal, as the woman I've been waiting 5 years to tell the truth. Mary looked down at their joined hands, her small, dark ones wrapped in his larger, scarred ones, and something shifted inside her. A memory surfaced, a young man bleeding on her bathroom floor, his eyes wide with terror and gratitude, whispering, "Thank you," over and over like a prayer. "It was you," she breathed. "All this time. The tattoos. I didn't recognize you, because I was half dead and 20 pounds lighter." Michael smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "But I recognized you the second you walked through that door 11 months ago. Same eyes. Same gentle hands. Same good heart." Mary felt something break open in her chest, some tight, scared thing she'd been carrying for years finally releasing. She was so tired of being afraid. So tired of being small. "I don't know how to be what you're asking," she admitted. "Then we'll figure it out together." Michael's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "You saved my life once, Mary. Let me spend the rest of mine returning the favor." Across the city, in a hotel bar that catered to a rougher clientele, Tara Reppert sat at the corner booth nursing her third martini. Her red dress was wrinkled, her carefully styled hair was falling out of its pins, and her mascara had left dark tracks down her cheeks. She looked like exactly what she was. A desperate woman with nothing left to lose. The man who slid into the booth across from her wore a leather jacket and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. They called him Viper in the circles where such names mattered, the kind of circles Michael Fung had clawed his way out of, and this man had climbed deeper into. "Tara Reppert," Viper said, his accent thick with Eastern European consonants. "I heard you had an interesting evening." "Word travels fast," Tara said bitterly. "Bad news always does." Viper signaled for a drink.
"So,
"The great Michael Fung threw you out for a maid." How deliciously ironic. Tara's hands tightened around her glass. "He's going to regret this." "Is he?" Viper's eyes gleamed with interest. "And how do you propose to make that happen?" Tara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I know things. Security codes. Business contacts. Where he keeps his offshore accounts. I know everything about his operation. Dangerous things to know. Dangerous things to share." "He took everything from me." Tara's voice cracked with rage. "My home. My status. My life. All for some nobody who probably doesn't even know what fork to use at dinner." Viper studied her for a long moment, then smiled his predatory smile. "I think, Mrs. Reppert, that you and I could help each other. Michael Fung has been a thorn in my organization's side for far too long. If you're willing to share what you know." "What do I get?" "Revenge," Viper said simply. "And enough money to start over somewhere far from here. Somewhere Michael Fung's reputation can't reach." Tara drained her martini and held out her hand. "Then we have a deal." As they shook hands, neither of them noticed the man in the corner booth taking photos with his phone, one of Michael's people, already tracking the fallout. The game was just beginning, and Tara Reppert had no idea she was already 3 moves behind. The manila envelope felt heavy in Tara's hands, though it contained nothing but paper, blueprints, security codes, schedules. Just information. But information, she'd learned in 3 years of marriage to Michael Fung, was the most dangerous currency in the world. She sat across from Viper in a different hotel now, a suite this time, paid for with the last of her emergency credit cards. Through the window, the city glittered with indifferent lights. Somewhere out there, in that mansion she called home, Michael was probably laughing with that girl, planning a future that didn't include her. "This is everything?" Viper asked, spreading the documents across the coffee table with the careful attention of a jeweler examining diamonds. Every security code, every camera blind spot, every panic room location. Tara's voice was flat now, emptied of emotion. 3 days of rage had burned down to cold ash. And this, she tapped a calendar page, is the annual staff holiday. Every year, Michael gives everyone except his core security team 3 days off. It's next week. The house will be practically empty. Viper's smile widened. And the girl? She'll be there? Something twisted in Tara's chest, but she pushed it down. Where else would she be? She's living in my bedroom now, wearing my clothes, playing house with my husband. Your ex-husband, Viper corrected gently. The divorce papers were filed yesterday. I have people who keep track of such things. Tara's jaw clenched. Then I have even less reason to hold back. No hesitation. Viper studied her face. Once I move on this, there's no going back.
People will die, Tara.
Maybe including your Michael. He's not my Michael anymore. Tara stood and moved to the window, her arms wrapped around herself. Do what you need to do. I just want to be far away when it happens. Already arranged. Tomorrow night, you'll be on a plane to Sao Paulo. New name, new life, and $500,000 in an account only you can access. Viper joined her at the window. By the time anyone realizes what happened, you'll be untouchable. Tara nodded, not trusting her voice. Below them, the city pulsed with life. Thousands of people living ordinary lives, unaware of the violence being planned in this anonymous hotel suite. She wondered, briefly, if any of them would mourn Michael Fung when he was gone. Probably not. Men like him didn't get mourned. They got replaced. One question, Viper said. Why not just take the money and run? Why do you need him dead? Tara turned to face him, and for the first time in days, she smiled. A brittle, broken thing. Because as long as he's alive, I'll always be the woman he threw away for a maid. But if he dies, then I'm the widow, the survivor, the one who got away. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Funny how death can rewrite a story, isn't it? Viper raised his glass in a mock toast. To rewriting stories, then. They drank, and somewhere across the city, Mary Okafor was learning what it felt like to be safe. The dining room had been transformed. Gone were the crowds of strangers and the oppressive weight of performance. Instead, a single table was set near the window, overlooking the estate's gardens where spring flowers were just beginning to bloom. Candles flickered in simple holders, not the elaborate crystal monstrosities from Tara's party, but something warmer, more intimate. Mary stood in the doorway wearing a dress Michael had bought her. Navy blue, elegant but not ostentatious, with long sleeves that covered the fading bruises on her arms. She'd argued against accepting it, against accepting any of the things he'd tried to give her over the past 3 days. But he'd looked so hopeful, so earnest, that she'd finally relented. You look beautiful, Michael said, and the way he said it, quiet and reverent, like a prayer, made her believe it might be true. I feel like I'm playing dress-up, Mary admitted, smoothing the fabric nervously. Like any second someone's going to realize I don't belong here. Michael crossed the room and took her hands. He traded his usual dark suits for simple black slacks and a white button-down, no tie. Without the armor of his formal wear, he looked younger, more approachable, more human. You belong here more than anyone I've ever let through those doors, he said. But if you don't believe me yet, that's okay. We have time. He led her to the table and pulled out her chair, a gesture that still made her uncomfortable, being served instead of serving. The meal was simple by the mansion standards: roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, crusty bread. Food that reminded her of her mother's cooking, though she didn't tell him that. Didn't tell him she'd cried when she first smelled it, overwhelmed by memories and gratitude. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. Through the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Tell me about your mother, Michael said eventually. You mentioned she passed. Was it recent? Mary's hand went instinctively to her throat, where the gold cross now hung on a new chain Michael had commissioned. 2 years ago. Cancer. By the time they caught it, there was nothing. She swallowed hard. The bills, they just kept coming even after she was gone. Medical debt doesn't care if you're grieving. Is that why you were working 3 jobs? 3 jobs, night shifts, whatever I could find. Mary stared at her plate. I kept thinking if I just worked hard enough, I could pay it off. Keep the house. Keep something of her alive. She laughed bitterly. Stupid, right? Killing myself to keep a building. Not stupid, Michael said firmly. Love isn't stupid. Loyalty isn't stupid. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Your mother raised someone extraordinary. That house is already paid off, by the way. I had my lawyers handle it yesterday. Mary's head snapped up. Michael, you can't just. I can and I did. It's yours, free and clear. You can live there, sell it, rent it out, whatever you want. It's not charity, Mary. It's the least I can do for the woman who gave me my life back. Tears pricked at Mary's eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Then don't. Just. Michael hesitated, vulnerability flickering across his face. Just stay. That's all I want. For you to stay and let me prove that you deserve every good thing this world has to offer. Mary looked at him, really looked at him, past the tattoos and the reputation and the violence that clung to him like cologne. She saw the boy bleeding in an alley, terrified and alone. The man who'd knelt in broken glass to protect her. The person who'd remembered her kindness when the rest of the world had forgotten she existed. I'm scared, she admitted. Of this. Of you. Of how much my life has changed in 3 days. Good, Michael said. I'm terrified too. That you'll wake up one morning and realize you made a mistake. That I'll do something to hurt you, even accidentally. That I'll prove I'm exactly the monster everyone thinks I am. You're not a monster. I've done monstrous things, Mary. You should know that before. He pulled his hand back, his expression hardening. I've killed people, ordered deaths, built an empire on blood and fear. If you stay with me, that's the world you're entering. I can protect you from most of it, but I can't change what I am. Mary was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she reached across the table and took his hand back. My mother used to say that God puts people in our path for a reason. That night in the alley, maybe I was supposed to find you. Maybe you were supposed to find me again. Maybe we're both exactly where we're meant to be. Michael's eyes shimmered with something that might have been tears. You still believe in God? After everything? I believe in second chances, Mary said. And kindness. And that people can change if they want it badly enough. She squeezed his hand. Do you want to change, Michael? More than anything, he whispered. For you, I want to be better. Then that's enough, Mary said and meant it. They finished dinner as the last light faded from the sky. Michael told her about his plans to transition more of his business into legitimate operations, real estate, investments, things that wouldn't require him to carry a gun everywhere he went. Mary told him about her dream of going back to school, maybe becoming a real nurse, finishing what she'd started before her mother got sick. It was the first night Mary went to bed in the master suite and didn't feel like an intruder. The first night she fell asleep next to Michael Fung and felt something that might have been happiness. She had no way of knowing it would be her last peaceful night for a long time. The power cut at 2:47 a.m. Mary woke to absolute darkness, the kind that pressed against her eyes like a physical thing. Beside her, Michael was already moving, his military instincts kicking in before his conscious mind fully engaged. Don't move, he whispered, his voice deadly calm. Don't make a sound. Mary's heart hammered against her ribs. What's happening? I don't know yet. Stay here. He was pulling on clothes, moving with practiced efficiency in the dark. She heard a drawer open, the metallic click of something heavy and purposeful. A gun. Then the first gunshot shattered the silence. It came from downstairs, a sharp crack followed by the unmistakable sound of glass breaking. Then more shots, rapid fire, accompanied by shouting in a language Mary didn't recognize. Russian, maybe. Or Ukrainian. Michael. Her voice came out as a terrified squeak. He was at her side in an instant, pressing something cold and heavy into her hands. A flashlight. Listen to me very carefully. There's a panic room behind the bookshelf in my office. Down the hall, third door on the right. You're going to go there now, lock yourself in, and press the red button on the wall. It alerts my security team and the police. Do you understand? I'm not leaving you.
Mary.
He gripped her shoulders, his face close to hers in the darkness. I need you safe. I can't fight if I'm worried about you. Please. More gunshots.
Closer now.
The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs. Michael kissed her forehead hard, then pushed her toward the door.
Go. Now.
Mary ran. The hallway was a nightmare of shadows and echoing violence. She could hear them now. Men moving through the house with military precision, their voices cold and efficient as they called out room clearances. The flashlight beam trembled in her shaking hands as she counted doors.
1, 2,
3. An explosion of sound behind her. Michael had emerged from the bedroom, and the hallway erupted in muzzle flashes and thunder. Mary screamed and threw herself through the office door, slamming it behind her. Her hands fumbled with the lock as bullets punched through the wood above her head. Behind the bookshelf. He'd said behind the bookshelf. She was yanking at books, looking for the release, when she heard Michael cry out, a sound of pain that sent ice through her veins. Mary froze, her hand on a leather-bound volume. Behind her, the door was splintering under sustained gunfire. In front of her, safety was seconds away. She could hide, call for help, survive. But Michael's pained grunt came again, and something inside her snapped. She'd saved him once before. She could do it again. Mary turned away from the bookshelf and ran back toward the door. She killed the flashlight and eased the door open just enough to see. The hallway had become a war zone. 3 men in tactical gear were advancing on Michael, who was pinned behind an overturned dresser, one hand pressed against his side where blood was spreading dark across his white shirt. He was firing back, but his movements were sluggish, his aim off. Mary's mind raced. She knew this house better than anyone. Every room, every closet, every secret passage she discovered during 11 months of obsessive cleaning. The service corridors, the dumbwaiters, the hidden staircases that Tara had never bothered to learn about because she'd never carried her own laundry. She could flank them. Mary slipped back into the office and felt her way to the small door beside the bookshelf. A service entrance the maids used. It led to a narrow corridor that ran parallel to the main hallway, with access points every 20 feet. She moved through the darkness, counting steps, using her memory as a map. Michael had mentioned a war bag once, making a dark joke about how old habits died hard. She'd been dusting his closet at the time and had seen it, a black duffel tucked behind his winter coats. She'd assumed it was gym equipment. Now she prayed it was something else. The corridor opened into Michael's walk-in closet. Mary could hear the gunfight continuing on the other side of the wall. She found the duffel by feel, unzipped it, and her hands closed around cold metal.
Guns.
At least 3 of them. Ammunition. Something that felt like a knife. And a first aid kit, the serious kind, the kind meant for bullet wounds. Mary had never fired a gun in her life, but she'd stitched a man back together with fishing line and prayer. She could learn. She grabbed the smallest handgun, checked that it was loaded the way she'd seen in movies, and moved back into the service corridor. There was an access panel that opened behind the attackers. She'd used it once to retrieve a bracelet one of the other maids had dropped. If she could get behind them, Mary's hands had stopped shaking. Her breathing had steadied. She felt the same cold calm that had descended over her that night 5 years ago when she'd found a dying man in an alley and decided his life was worth saving. The access panel opened silently. Mary emerged behind the 3 gunmen, all of them focused on Michael's position. She raised the gun with both hands, aimed at the closest man's legs. She couldn't bring herself to aim higher, and pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly knocked her over, but the shot connected. The man went down screaming, and his companions spun around in confusion. In that moment of distraction, Michael moved. Despite his injury, he was fast, and now he had the advantage. 2 shots, and the second attacker dropped. The third man turned his gun toward Mary. Down, Michael roared. Mary dropped flat as Michael's shot passed over her head, and the third man crumpled. Silence, broken only by heavy breathing and the ringing in Mary's ears. Mary? Michael's voice was weak. Mary, are you hurt? She crawled toward him on hands and knees. He was slumped against the wall now, his hand still pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. So much blood. I'm okay, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. But you're not. Let me see. The panic room. I told you to, and I didn't listen. Now shut up and let me help you. Mary pulled his hand away from the wound. The bullet had caught him in the lower left side, below the ribs. Bad, but maybe not fatal if she could stop the bleeding. She'd brought the first aid kit, and now her nursing training, limited as it was, kicked in. This is going to hurt, she warned, then pressed a gauze pad hard against the entry wound. Michael hissed in pain. I know.
I'm sorry.
I need you to stay awake, okay? Keep talking to me. Feels familiar. Michael gasped out a laugh. You, saving my life again. Seems to be becoming a habit. Mary's hands worked automatically, securing the bandage, checking for an exit wound. There, the bullet had gone through. That was good. Better than having it lodge inside. She packed both wounds and wrapped his torso tight with medical tape. How did you know? Michael asked. His face was pale, shock setting in. About the war bag. I pay attention, Mary said. She'd found a syringe of morphine in the kit and was debating whether to use it. He needed the pain relief, but it might make him drowsy.
Can you stand?
We need to move before more of them come. More are coming, Michael confirmed grimly. This was a coordinated hit. At least 6 men, maybe more. They knew exactly when and how to strike. Then we need to get to that panic room. Mary slung his arm over her shoulders and helped him to his feet. He was heavy, leaning most of his weight on her, but she managed. The office was only a few feet away. They'd almost made it when footsteps thundered on the stairs. Mary half-carried, half-dragged Michael through the office door and slammed it shut. This time, she found the bookshelf release. A leather-bound copy of The Art of War. How appropriate, and the shelf swung open to reveal a steel door. Behind them, someone was kicking at the office door. They had seconds. Mary got Michael into the panic room and hit the red button on the wall. Lights flickered on, revealing a space the size of a walk-in closet with reinforced walls, a bench, and a radio console. The steel door sealed shut with a pneumatic hiss just as the office door exploded inward. They were safe. For now. Mary eased Michael onto the bench and knelt in front of him, checking his bandages. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. His skin was cold and clammy. You should have run, Michael said quietly. You should have saved yourself. Mary looked up at him. This man who'd protected her, who'd given up his life for her, who'd shown her that she was worth protecting. You said you fell in love with me because I saved a stranger without asking for anything in return. Did you really think I'd leave you behind? Michael's laugh was weak but genuine. I should have known better. Yeah, Mary said, pressing her forehead against his. You really should have. Through the reinforced walls, they could hear chaos, more gunfire, shouting, the sound of things breaking. But in this small space, wrapped in steel and each other's presence, there was peace. We're going to be okay, Mary whispered. I know, Michael said, because you're here. And for the first time since that night in the alley 5 years ago, Mary believed that maybe, just maybe, they both deserved to be saved. The siege lasted another 47 minutes. Michael and Mary listened through the panic room's communication system as Michael's security team, alerted by the panic button, arrived and systematically cleared the house. The police came next, their sirens cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like mechanical screams. When they finally emerged, the mansion looked like a war zone. Bullet holes pocked the walls. Blood stained the marble floors. For bodies lay covered with sheets, and 2 more men were being carried out in handcuffs, wounded but alive. An EMT tried to separate Mary from Michael, but he gripped her hand with surprising strength. She doesn't leave my sight, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. So Mary rode in the ambulance with him, holding his hand as they rushed through empty streets. In the ER, she stood outside the operating room for 3 hours, still wearing her blood-stained navy dress, refusing to move until a tired surgeon emerged and said the words she needed to hear. He's going to be fine. Michael spent 2 days in the hospital. Mary never left his room. On the 3rd day, Detective Sarah Chun came to take their statements. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Mary immediately respected. We found Tara Ruppert, Chun said, flipping through her notepad. She was picked up at the airport trying to board a flight to Sao Paulo. Had $500,000 in cash and a fake passport. Funny thing, though, the cash was counterfeit. And the passport? Flagged by Interpol before she even reached the gate. Michael, propped up in his hospital bed, smiled grimly. Let me guess. Someone tipped you off. Anonymous call came in about 6 hours before the attack. Warned us about a possible hit on your residence and suggested we might want to keep an eye on the ex-Mrs. Feng. Chen's expression was neutral, but her eyes said she knew exactly who'd made that call. You've got good friends, Mr. Feng. The best, Michael agreed. As for Viper and his crew, Chen's smile was satisfied. The survivors are cooperating. Seems their boss promised them a big payday that never materialized. They're more than happy to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. Viper himself is in the wind, but we'll find him. After Chen left, Mary perched carefully on the edge of Michael's bed. You knew, she said. You knew Tara was going to betray you. I suspected. I had people watching her from the moment she left the house. When she met with Viper, they reported back immediately. Michael reached for Mary's hand. I couldn't stop the attack without revealing my surveillance, which would have driven the whole thing underground. Better to let it play out where I could control it. You used yourself as bait, Mary said flatly. I used us as bait, Michael corrected. And I'm sorry for that. But I knew my team would respond in time. I knew we could handle it.
He squeezed her hand.
And I knew you were strong enough to survive anything they threw at us. You had a lot of faith in someone who was a maid 3 days ago. I had faith in the woman who saved my life twice, Michael said. And I wasn't wrong. 3 weeks later, the Feng estate hosted its first dinner party since the night everything changed. The dining room had been completely renovated, new walls to cover the bullet holes, new floors to replace the blood-stained marble. The crystal chandelier had been replaced with something simpler, more elegant. The oppressive weight of old money and older cruelty had been stripped away, leaving something cleaner, lighter. Mary stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, adjusting the emerald green dress Michael had commissioned for her. It was beautiful, tailored perfectly to her frame, elegant without being ostentatious. Her hair was styled in soft curls, and the gold cross glinted at her throat. She looked like someone who belonged here. "You ready?" Michael asked, emerging from the bathroom in a black suit that couldn't quite hide the bandages still wrapped around his torso. He was healing well, but the doctors said it would be months before he was fully recovered. "I'm terrified," Mary admitted. "All those people, judging me, wondering what I'm doing here." "Let them wonder." Michael crossed the room and took her hands. "You're here because you're brilliant and brave, and you saved my life. Multiple times. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. You can't just throw everyone out who disagrees with you." "Watch me," Michael said, but he was smiling. The guests began arriving at 7. Not the social climbers and parasites who'd attended Tara's party, but real people, Michael's business partners who'd earned their positions through merit, not connections. Some members of his security team, promoted to management. A few neighborhood families he'd been quietly helping for years. And, to Mary's surprise, some of the other household staff, dressed in their finest and looking just as nervous as she felt. "You invited them?" Mary asked, watching Rosa and Chun and little Amara file in, eyes wide with wonder. "They're part of this house," Michael said simply. "They should celebrate with us." As the evening progressed, Mary found herself relaxing. These weren't the cold, judgmental strangers from before. These were people who smiled genuinely, who asked about her interests, who treated her with respect. When Michael introduced her, not as the maid or even my girlfriend, but as Mary, the woman I love, no one laughed or whispered. They applauded. Midway through dinner, Michael stood and tapped his glass for silence. The room quieted, all eyes turning to him. "3 weeks ago, this house was attacked," he began, his voice carrying through the room. "People died. I nearly died. Everything I'd built was nearly destroyed." He looked down at Mary, and his expression softened. "But I didn't die. Because this woman, Mary Okafor, refused to run when any sane person would have. She saved my life for the second time, and in doing so, she saved everything I care about." He held out his hand to Mary. After a moment's hesitation, she stood and took it, letting him pull her to his side. "I spent years building an empire on fear and violence," Michael continued. "I thought that's what strength was, making people afraid to cross you. But Mary taught me something different. She taught me that real strength is kindness. That real power is choosing to help someone even when there's nothing in it for you. That the bravest thing you can do is keep your humanity when the world tries to take it away." He turned to face her fully, both hands gripping hers now. "I love you, Mary. You're the best person I've ever known, and if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." Mary's eyes filled with tears. Around them, the room held its collective breath. "I love you too," she whispered. "Even though you're dramatic and overprotective and you have terrible taste in hiding spots for war bags." The room erupted in laughter and applause. Michael pulled Mary into a kiss that felt like a promise, like a new beginning, like everything she'd ever dreamed of but never thought she'd deserve. When they finally broke apart, someone in the back started a toast. "To Mary and Michael." "To Mary and Michael," the room echoed. Mary looked out at the crowd, these people who'd welcomed her, who'd chosen to see her as more than just the help, and felt something settle deep in her chest. This was home. Not the mansion or the money or the status, but this feeling of being seen and valued and loved. Michael wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close against his side despite his healing wounds. "What are you thinking?" he murmured. "I'm thinking," Mary said slowly, "that 5 years ago, I found a dying man in an alley and decided his life was worth saving. And now look where we are. Any regrets?" Mary leaned into him, feeling his warmth, his strength, the steady beat of his heart. Not even one. Outside, the city stretched away into darkness. Somewhere out there, Tara Ruppert sat in a holding cell, waiting for a trial that would seal her fate. Somewhere, Viper was running, always looking over his shoulder. The past was littered with ghosts and mistakes and pain. But here, in this dining room full of light and laughter and hope, Mary and Michael had built something different. Something worth fighting for. Something worth saving. And when the dinner finally ended and the guests departed with warm goodbyes and promises to return, Mary and Michael stood together at the window, watching the first light of dawn paint the sky. "Queen of the Manor," Michael teased, kissing her temple. "How does it feel?" Mary thought about it, about the journey from frightened maid to this moment, about all the fear and pain and transformation it had taken to get here. About the girl who'd found a stranger in an alley and the woman she'd become. "It feels," she said finally, her hand finding his, like home, and in the growing light of a new day, with the man she loved beside her and a future full of possibilities stretching ahead, Mary Okafor finally let herself believe it was true.